Hello, Rule of Two review. I thought I'd do a reply to your video where you talked about the N64 and created a bit of a love letter for it. And I'm going to do the same. I'm going to give my own speech about the N64. I'll see how I go. It's unrehearsed. I am 39, so I also lived through it, and I did feel very lucky that it arrived when I was really young and that I got to experience in a unique way because that was just what was happening when I was in my early teens, and I don't see how anyone can experience that again. It was just a time that went, and so now I'll just talk about that time. I was very lucky that my parents would buy quite a lot of N64 games for me. The launch was with Mario 64, Wave Race 64, and Pilot Wings 64. All three games from Nintendo. And it was the best time for me. I also am of the view that it heralds um, a new paradigm for gaming, and it was for me also the most exciting console. I have to admit, a lot of consoles have been exciting for me, but I will actually single out the N64 as being my all time favorite. And what confirms that thinking for me is that I've actually been loving the resurgence of the N64 on the Nintendo Switch, the subscription. I really dug into that, put in 250 hours into the N64 on the subscription, and just to relive the nostalgia. You said it, definitely nostalgia. And oh gosh, so it really it takes me back, like as a 39-year-old or when I was 38 playing this, going all the way back to when I was around 12 or so when the N64 launched, and yeah, I was about 12 when it launched. So and it was an incredible time. I'll try to talk about why I think the N64 holds such a high level for me, is at a high spot in the top podium. That's where it is for me. Um, oof, not used to doing these videos, but I'll try. Um, so I want to actually touch on some other points. So for me, the way it looked with the vintage retro graphics now it would be considered retro and vintage, is to me the style was so unique that it was a different experience for me, and I really liked that experience. It allowed my imagination to run wild with it, and that's not something necessarily that I get with more advanced games now because the graphics are so advanced. I'm like, well, okay, this is what I get. But back then, I would liken it to something like, for example, if we go even further back in time, people would read books and there'd be no visuals, no sound, no interaction, and yet people would still make it work, in their imagination. And that's how I would regard the N64, where you would imagine things and feel things that weren't there, but it was like inviting you to do that. And I feel that Mario 64 aged really well because it did not have any writing, and I want to emphasize why this is significant, because they were essentially inviting the player to interpret the game. And when I was a kid, I interpreted it one way. Now, as a 39-year-old, I interpret it yet another way. See, so it's like a different game because they're not controlling the narrative. I, as the player, control the narrative the way I interpret it. And this is where it was really magical for me back then as well as now, that I can look at it and feel it in a whole different way, and feeling it is another point I want to touch on, where for me, I really believed I was in the world and that I could touch the world. Mario 64 was a great game for this, where it was like, I'm touching this, I'm next to that, I'm on this side of the 3D space, now I'm on that side of the 3D space. And all of that for me was very special. To me, that interaction with the video game world was much more profound than my interactions in the real world, like going to school, talking to people, moving around. Um, I mean, and then that's true now. I mean, I'm trying now to sort of build up my physical stamina because I realize it's important. But I always have the view, am I meant to be having as much fun walking in the summer in Australia when it's 40 degrees outside and you get your face burnt versus just moving around in a wacky, very fun world in Mario 64. Um, I mean, yeah, the CGI was beating reality, as ironic as that sounds, but it still does. And yeah, I would love to make a video talking about every single game that I've played. I've played a lot on the N64, but yeah, also I'll just narrow it down to Mario 64. So it basically uh, felt like, if I'm swimming, I'm really swimming, and I've now gone swimming in real life many times, but yeah, I would say it felt, because the thing is, you run it in your mind, so it's like it felt to me like I was swimming, because in my mind I was thinking that I am. So okay, physically I wasn't, but I was swimming in my mind. So that's just one example of one behavior a person would do in the game that was very profound for me that I could not get in real life. I think you wanted to say Bob-omb Battlefield is the first level. Um, so that's one thing. Another thing is to see all the iconic characters of the Mario franchise in 3D for the first time. All the enemies, Mario himself, Peach. You get a letter from Peach and a voiceover for Peach at the start. Mario jumps out of the pipe at the beginning, and then if you look carefully, he's even like squinting with his eyes, almost like about to cry. He's entered this 3D space for the first time as a person, as a human. I jump into it the same way, like from reality, out of a pipe into this incredible world. Could burst into tears as well. Another thing I would like to say before I forget is I do remember that I am, like, how I enjoyed it because I play it now on the Nintendo Switch, but I can also remember there are some differences. Like in certain ways, I enjoy it more now. Definitely not when I first played it, like the first experience. But I want to say one thing, like, because I remember, like, now when I play it, I understand what playfulness means, and I can see that this is what Nintendo wanted. They wanted people to enter the game with a playfulness, to just do anything, to not be like so strict about what they do, to just enjoy being in the world. And this is not something I understood when I was 12. It was not taught in school. It was not, it was like, it was all about just like get things done, complete your homework, get an A grade. In the N64, Mario 64, get all the stars. But now, it's like, when I play it now, I'm not trying to get all the stars. I mean, I've done that. I'm now just enjoying my time in the world. I don't, I know there are safer ways to play, but I choose not to. I don't even stretch the camera to the furthest distance, which makes the game by far the easiest. And I remember I did that for everything in Mario 64. Now I refuse to have the camera at the furthest distance, so I play the game when it's essentially a bit harder. And so that's something I discovered, like the playfulness of it. Um, So yeah, so that's Mario 64. 10 minutes. We're gonna have to wrap this. I'm gonna keep it half the length. Love to talk more, but yeah, got a bit covered in it. Yeah, I'm just gonna have to say bye. Like, it will be with me for the rest of my life, also, for sure.